who believes in a God-given oral tradition. So it's very easy to work out. They've all made public statements on the matter. The Reform, they broke off 200 years ago, especially the Pittsburgh Convention, saying God didn't even give the Torah. The Torah is a man-made document. It was not written by God, and certainly there's no oral tradition. It was at the Pittsburgh Convention when they actually condemned Brit Milah, circumcision, as a barbarous cruelty and a throwback to our African roots. They came out against kitchen Judaism, against keeping kosher. The first Reform rabbinical ordination ceremony, they served frog legs a la creme and all sorts of other interesting non-kosher foods in order to make the point that God did not give the Torah. So from the very, very, very beginning of the Reform breakoff, there was a complete rejection of a divine Torah, let alone a divine oral tradition. Therefore, the Reform couldn't be carrying it. They reformed the tradition. They broke away from the tradition 200 years ago. Much, much later, an argument broke out between the leaders of the Reform movement, Wise and Frankel, who initially was part of the Reform movement, broke off to the right. Frankel ended up becoming the grandfather of the Conservative movement. Frankel said that if you continue to force Jews to abandon their traditions, you're going to inspire a rebellion. And therefore, he advised the Reform movement, cut it out, like slow down, stop shaking the Jews by the collar and tearing them away from their traditions. Eventually, they're going to rebel and go right back to Orthodox Judaism. And therefore, Frankel said, the whole goal is to move the Jews forward so slowly that no one notices the forward progress. Make every change so apparently natural that no one actually realizes the Jews are being secularized. And in this way, you will actually succeed in moving the Jews away from these barbaric traditions, and they won't rebel against you. And so the conservative philosophy was, don't make any public statements about whether the Torah is from God or not from God. Don't make statements about this. Just allow the Jews to slowly drift from tradition, and every time the Jews take a step to the left, rubber stamp that step, saying, yeah, that's what God intended. Of course you can drive to the synagogue on Shabbat. Of course. That's lighting a fire, and it says explicitly in the Torah, right? Don't light a fire in any of your dwelling places. So that's okay. You can still light fires. What you're all doing is what God wants you to be doing. So in this way, the Reform movement very quickly, the Conservative movement much more slowly, allowed the Jews to drift away from the tradition. But neither one of them believed that God gave the Torah. Although if you grew up in a conservative synagogue 10 to 15 years ago, you never would have known this. Because in conservative synagogues, it was never mentioned that God didn't give the Torah.